Welcome everybody to Motion Graphics 667. How's everybody doing?
Okay, how are you?
Good.
Good. So we've wrapped up video production, video editing. We're grading your assignments, and then we have records to turn in with your grades, and we will be posting your grades or sending you copies of your grades within the next week. Okay, so that's good to know. Any feedback for me on the last session, good or bad?
Good.
Okay, thank you.
I thought it was good. I like that you mixed the film theory with the motion graphics. I think that was helpful.
Very good. Yeah.
There's a lot of information. It was kind of overwhelming
Yeah.
in 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's a lot. And my feeling is that it's better to give you a lot than too little, and you can use what you want and take what you want from it, and the rest of it you can either come back and look at later or review, or different places where you can go to find out more things, and give you some ideas about what to do next, and different ways of engaging in the content. What did you guys think of the assignments?
I thought the assignments were good. I thought the organization of the Canvas shell could be a little bit easier. I mean, there were a lot of things I found confusing, which you addressed a lot of them through, once I mentioned them. But yeah, I just think it's a little bit complicated sometimes to find exactly what you need in that Canvas shell, and any way to organize that to the student's advantage would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. I'm gonna rehaul that and try and make it a little bit easier for people to find what they want. I think I did a better job of organizing this one, so I don't think that should be a problem with this one. I'm seriously thinking of getting rid of the essay assignment. What do you guys think about that?
I don't have an opinion either way. I mean, I didn't think it was that bad. It was interesting to, to try to verbalize how, what you're seeing on the screen. But yeah, as far as that being helpful practically, maybe not.
I think it's the least useful assignment. I like production assignments where you make things, and it's good in that it gives you some idea of thinking critically. So I like that part about it. But at the same time, it's like, I think you might be able to spend your time doing other things that are more important, So I think the other assignments are good because they're open-ended enough for you to be able to share, to actually be able to work on something that could find its way into a portfolio. Your essays are not going to find their way into a portfolio. So seriously thinking about dropping that essay assignment.
I have a suggestion. If for the assignments, if there's a way to estimate the hours that you assume each assignment is going to take the student, so that they can prepare ahead of time how long they think they're going to need to spend on the assignment to complete it. I don't know if there's a way for you to do that on your end, or ask students how long they took, but that might be helpful for pre-planning, since these courses are so, they're so shrunken in. You only have these 5 weeks. I would have started earlier on a few things if I had known how long they would take me.
Yeah, well, that's kind of open-ended because it's going to take there's so many variables there that there's really no way I can tell you how long it's going to take. Are you shooting indoor? Are you shooting outdoors? Are you shooting something that's 3 minutes long? Are you shooting something that's longer? Are you shooting something that's got dialogue, a script, a narrative? Is it live action? Are you having people so that there's no way that I can do that.
Excuse me if I may
Hey,
interrupt.
Jeffrey, hi.
Hey, I tried the regular link and that wouldn't let me in. I downloaded the calendar and then I used the link on the calendar and that did allow me in. So,
So
there's something wrong, I think, with the initial link that's embedded in the email.
okay, let me
Yeah,
reset this.
I noticed there was actually two different Zoom meeting numbers. There's the one at the top of the email that didn't work and asked for a passcode.
Okay,
I actually just emailed you about that. And then I found a different Zoom meeting number at the very bottom of the email, and that one
Okay.
just let me in.
all right, let me resend that. Jesus. Oh, I see where it is. Let's just take this out.
The link embedded in the download for my calendar was correct.
Right. Let me send this back out. No. All right, let's do this again. All right. Okay, I just sent out another Zoom session link with that modification. Let's get in here. See if that helps. Here's Kevin. We're getting there. We're getting there. So yeah, there's no way I can estimate how long it's going to take to do those projects.
What about sorry, not the assignments where we do our own video, but what about the ones that are like pre-set up, like the bike project and things like that, to give an estimate? or maybe even just, you know,
Like,
help
you know,
people
because how long
start
it
on it.
takes for you to do it is going to be different from somebody. I mean, I don't know how long it would take me to do it.
Well, I mean,
There are some that I awarded more points for because they're a little more complicated. But I don't know if there's a way to actually just say,
is there a way then to maybe encourage people to start on the projects earlier, like once they pass, or once you've talked about a certain part of the, you know, you've discussed, okay, like how to audio edit, and then you go into like the music and sync or something, so people know now's the time that you're prepared to work on these projects.
I think I did that. I think I did do that. Yeah, I
I
think
think the only possible thing we could provide is a range, but it would have to be a very wide range because of the numerous variables involved with everyone's skill level.
yeah,
And I question how valuable that range would be.
yeah. And the other part of this, I think people fail to grasp is that you're supposed to do 25 hours of work a week in the shell. And I think people, they hear that number and it just goes right over their heads. And then they get in and realize that it really is supposed to be 25 hours of work. And then they feel overwhelmed. And it's like, well, you know, that the commitment from the student is 25 hours a week. And, you know, I don't think a lot of times people are making that commitment. So if you're making that commitment, it doesn't, it's not overwhelming. It's not unreasonable. But if you're not, and then you get down towards the end of the class and you realize there's a whole bunch of stuff that you're not capable of doing yet, or that you don't feel comfortable doing, it's because a lot of people haven't been spending enough time in the shell. And I look at how much time people spend. Obviously you can be doing work outside of the shell, but I look at how much time people spend in the shell, and lots of times that seems to be a deficiency. So yeah, I mean, yeah, so estimating how long it would take to do those projects is, I don't know if there's really a way to do that.
Okay.
It's a good
Well,
idea, you know, but
okay, I'm just saying from a student's perspective, like I kept waiting because we were learning as we were going. So I didn't feel comfortable starting the assignment because I was waiting to learn more stuff.
right,
that makes sense.
that's why I made the assignments. Now, because you can't really do this until there's a certain amount that you have under your belt.
Right.
So,
Which I
and that's why the
understand.
assignments aren't due until the last week of class.
Right, but you're saying, see the contradiction there? Because you're saying I need to be spending 25 hours in the shell or working towards a class every week. But if you're not ready to start the assignments until week 4 or week 5, then everything's compressed down into a week where you have to figure out how to do it all in that 1 week. That's all I'm saying. It
Yeah.
worked out, but I'm just,
Yeah,
from a student perspective,
so how would you do it? How would you have people do these assignments?
I would probably mention, like, go through the assignments and say, okay, once we talk about, like I said, audio at this point, you should be starting on assignment X on week 3 or week 2, or after we discuss X or Y and Z. So people know you're ready, you have enough information to get that assignment done.
Okay.
I
after
was
week
fine
1 or
with
2.
I was fine with the schedule. I mean, there are tons of resources there, so you can always go back. The assignments have dates, and it's all about time management.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your. I think I did mention that after you get through a certain portion, I think after the 3rd week, I mentioned that you could probably start on your assignments. You can actually start thinking about your assignments much earlier than that. But yeah,
Is this setup going to be similar? So, for this portion of the class, is it going to be where
yeah,
we
it's gonna
have
be
to get to a
similar.
certain point? Well, if you can think about maybe letting us know again then for this assignment, like when we can start really digging into specific assignments once we've covered certain information, that would be helpful.
Okay. All right. Well, like I said, I don't know if it works that way. I can't see how I can do that. I mean, if we had longer, like, you could have different assignments, do it at a different time. But we have a 5 week. Well, this was going to be 6 weeks. So you have to get through a certain portion of the content before you can do the work. I mean, it makes sense to me.
Maybe even going over the assignments and giving us examples of the assignments kind of up front might help people be thinking about how to do them and their timing associated with them.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I showed you guys samples, didn't I, of the assignments?
Yes, you did.
I thought I showed people, but you know, that's what other students have done.
You did do that, but at the end, I thought, not near the beginning or when you first assigned them.
You think it'd be better if I showed them to you before you started or near the beginning?
Well, yeah, that way we have an idea of how to structure what we're going to do, make sure we have the timing associated with it, et cetera. Even though we don't necessarily know how much time the assignments took the students that did them.
What was that, Alejandro?
Nothing. I just got in. I'm driving home now. I'm gonna mute myself.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, no, those are good suggestions. You know, I want feedback. If you think those things will help, I will try to incorporate that into the class so that you guys can get a better idea of what's expected. I thought I showed samples, but if you guys think I should show them sooner, I can do that. I don't think I could put an estimation on how long it should take you to do the project, because that's relative to your, like Jeffrey said, your learning capabilities, your skill set, and the parameter of the project you put in front of yourself. And you can scale that up and down, right? Like I said, you know, if you're ambitious, you can do something that's more lengthy or more complex. But the thing is that I'm not asking anyone to do anything that's necessarily lengthy or complex. So you can kind of decide for yourself how much work you want to put into those assignments. Of course, part of it is the execution and part of it is the concept.
I have a quick suggestion.
Yeah.
Would you be able to maybe put like in our class files, like student examples? I think that's kind of what people are more so just asking for, like just examples of other students' work, so we can kind of get an idea of engage, like where we get like just kind of to brainstorm, if nothing else.
All right, yeah. Let's do that. I have some student examples for this portion of the class and for the last portion. I'll make sure to show those to you. In fact, we can look at a couple tonight. I was showing examples of, yeah, you're right. I didn't emphasize that too much. And early time estimate. Okay. All right. Thank you. So yeah, I mean, I'm listening, and you know, the whole idea with this is it is a process. I have my ideas about how something like this should be taught. And then, you know, we're human, we make mistakes, but I have some ideas about what needs to be done in what order and how things should be processed. But student examples, show them a little bit earlier, make sure people understand the assignments. I think I went over those quite a few times to make sure people understood, but yeah, so let people know when they should start on their project. So I can do that. Let's do that. We'll make some more of a structure for that, structure for when you should start your projects.
Even show an example of how, when you're teaching us the techniques, of how those techniques were used within some of the student projects might help us to understand the application and improve our learning capability associated with those particular techniques.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
All
that's what I was gonna say. Because sometimes I would finish an assignment, and then next class we would kind of learn something new, and I would be like, "Oh, that's cool. I could have maybe used that one in my project I just turned in, or something like that."
Right. Well, that,
Yay.
well, that's the, the problem with learning anything new. You're going to be learning new things as you go. And, you're going to have to balance that with the fact that you're in a class and that you have to turn in assignments. So, yeah, I mean, I do the same thing too. I finish work and I go, wow, if I'd known about this, this, and this, it might would have changed my workflow. But I can't, you can't wait until you learn everything to start working. What I do is I try to give you as much time to learn as much about the software as you can before you have to turn in any work.
No, we can resubmit the assignments too. We have time to go in.
Right, you
and
have,
make
you
changes.
have that whole week
Exactly.
to, if you send the work in early enough, we can review it. You can make changes and modifications. So let's do this. Let's go in. Thank you all. It's good to have you guys here. Thanks for the feedback. I will incorporate that into the work, into the assignments. Hang on a second. And your feedback's important to me, and I listen to everybody. I may not agree, but I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to make modifications where I think it makes sense. So just give me a second here, and we'll get started.
So aside from that, how was your weekend, Alfred?
It was good. It was busy. You guys did a lot of great work. So obviously some things are making sense. And the people that apply themselves, you'll see results. You'll see things change. You'll see things get better. And this is where you're starting. So it's the idea is just to get you acclimated to some of these concepts and some of these techniques. So very good, everybody. Let's see here. Let's go to our class. All right, so everybody was able to get into the Canvas shell, and I hope that you take the time to read over the syllabus. And that kind of goes over what we're doing here is we're working with something called motion graphics. So this is a companion to the video production and video editing. And the idea is that these kind of go hand in hand. And when you complete both classes with a grade of C or better, you're able to get a certificate. And that certificate says that you are ready for entry-level work doing either video editing, video production, and or motion graphics. So this is the second part where we're concentrating on motion graphics. The tool that we will be using primarily for this is Adobe After Effects. And so Adobe After Effects is a motion graphics powerhouse. It's a very dense application. There's lots of stuff in here. Believe me, if you think you're going to learn stuff and then find out later that there are other ways to do things or more sophisticated elements in here, that's really going to be accelerated with After Effects because there's lots and lots and lots of content and methods and components in here. But the idea with the course one is to give you enough to understand the mechanics of doing basic operations. We're going to do a number of different types of animation and animation related types of video editing using the motion graphics tool After Effects. So dividing a couple of different categories. One is motion graphics, titling, animation. So we'll be doing a lot of work with that. creating things like animated elements, logos, splash screens, lower thirds and stuff like that. Other types of things that can be done in After Effects are green screen effects, rotoscoping, 3D animation, traditional animation, etc. So there's a whole lot of different components in here. And so we're going to cover an overview on all the different types of things that can be done in After Effects. And then you'll have some assignments due, just like you had before. And there'll be some mandatory assignments and optional assignments that you can do for a better grade and to explore other aspects of the application. So once again, you'll be turning in your homework the same way you did last time. You'll be exporting your elements out of After Effects, and then you'll be uploading them to your YouTube channel and then sending me a link. So this is the homepage, and we did a lot of work with Premiere in the previous course, and we'll also look at how to integrate Premiere and After Effects together, how to move back and forth between Premiere and After Effects. So before, I showed you how to jump from Premiere into After Effects. And this time, we're going to show you how to jump from After Effects into Premiere. And lots of times when I'm doing projects, sometimes you'll use After Effects all by itself. There's some differences in the way they're set up, but they complement one another. And then sometimes you'll use After Effects and Premiere together. Lots of times when I'm doing editing, I'm starting with a video project and I'm jumping elements over into After Effects and then moving them back over into Premiere. So we'll cover some of that. And then also there's other things you can integrate into After Effects. If you know how to use Photoshop, that's helpful. If you know how to use Adobe Illustrator, that's helpful too. If you don't, we won't have time to cover those things in class, but what I will be setting up is a small module for some basic Photoshop edits and some basic Adobe Illustrator edits, and how to work with the pen tool. So I haven't done that yet, but I'm going to be adding that in to give people some basic ideas of some of the edits that you might need to do, because you can integrate Photoshop and Illustrator into After Effects as well. It's not required, but it is helpful. I have your grading up here as far as the assignments are concerned, and you can see which ones are mandatory and which ones are optional. And then I have your grade points possible. And so you'll see what your assignments are going to be. Original animation demonstration follow through, create an original animation demonstration, squash and stretch. And so there's the assignments that you're going to be turning in for Mr. Khan, and the assignments turning in that you'll turn in for me. You're going to be doing another music animation. That's one of the mandatory assignments. Typographic animation and effect presets. Animate an object to follow along a path. So those are the assignments that Mr. Khan is offering you. And then what I have here is kind of an open-ended thing where you don't really have to do an assignment, but if you can see something, or if you find something, or you're watching a movie or a commercial and you see an effect that you'd like to try to emulate, we can look that up to see if we can't find a way to do that. And so the idea is that lots of times I'm watching, you'll see something like Shang-Chi's the 10 rings, where he's got the cool rings and they're flying all over the place. And so in After Effects, somebody's got a tutorial on how you could create an effect like that. So the idea is that you can always keep learning. It's an incredibly powerful application. It's an incredibly dense application. You're not going to learn everything there is to know about this application in the next 6 weeks. Okay, I mean, it's just that powerful. But the idea is to give you enough to feel comfortable working with the software. And my contention when I teach a class is to give you enough instruction so that you can learn more on your own, so that you can pick up any book or go to any YouTube tutorial and understand what they're talking about and be able to continue your studies and be self-reliant. So those are the objectives that and then of course, to be able to create something in that idiom, in that medium, the After Effects medium, etc. So our mandatory assignments for this class will be a logo animation, and I will have samples for you, and a commercial PSA bumper, and I will have samples for you. And then there are optional assignments as well, which is an animation project, an animated transition or background, a title sequence, like, you know, you watch a film or a documentary or a television show, or and you'll see really cool title sequences, right? And then there's a rotoscope or chroma key assignment that you can do as well. The way the class is going to be broken out is that there are a number of chapters, and at the end of every other chapter, you'll turn in an exercise, and then that will unlock the next chapter. Okay, and so those, you'll have to do those in order, and then once you finish each module, it'll unlock the next module, and then once you finish, usually it's every other module, you'll turn in an exercise from that module. And then these are your breakdowns for your grades as far as your grading is concerned. And that's basically how we're going to structure the content in the class. You're going to go to modules, and in modules, you have your projects from Mr. Khan. You have your animation.
Yeah.
Yes.
You asking me a question?
Yes, sir.
No, I'm asking, did you ask me a question?
Oh, no, I'm just looking at the content here. This is all really cool.
Cool.
Excellent. Good job, sir. Probably want to move this stuff out of Canvas on information calendar up into this section up here, and we can do that later.
Okay.
And
And
then,
can I interrupt you for
yeah,
just a
please,
second?
be my guest, my friend.
Thanks, excuse me. Yeah, let me just mention the, I need to get over to that right now. All right, so animating an object to follow along a path. I have a Zoom recording that I saved that I will be posting on that page. So please hold off on that until I get it up. I'm editing it as we speak in Premiere. Very useful tool. I'm sure you all would agree. And
Are you plugging your own classes there?
so yeah, I'm so that video is going to be up there. This is from a previous Zoom recording. I want to make sure it's up there because it's just useful. And we'll look for links from previous students who did.
Yeah, I have a bunch.
Yeah, the music animation. There's some really outstanding ones,
Yeah,
and we'll
we
post
have
those
some
on
up
there.
They're already up there.
Okay,
I
awesome.
can show a few tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah,
I was going to embed them in the assignment, so it'd be nice. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
You're welcome, Mr. Jeffrey.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, I need to add those into the Premiere portion of the class. I didn't really emphasize that very much, but I have samples for the ones in this class. Actually, some of the stuff from the other class too. So this is the stuff that's Mr. Khan's going to be having you work on. And then the After Effects Basics course is going to be where you start with Module 1. And all of your sample files, once again, are in a folder here. And just like before, you'll download these samples to be able to do the assignments, okay? So if you click on Sample Files 01, that's going to take you to the Adobe website, and you're going to download this project folder, and then you can follow these tutorials. You can always do those, and then also you'll have the ones that I'll be providing you, so you can do both. And I'm going to use these resources for like the first 1 or 2 modules. We just use like these resources. So you're going to click make a folder in your hard drive. Let's step through it. You're going to go sample files to practice with. You're going to download this as a zip. You're going to make a folder, say on documents, and call it, say, motion graphics. And then we're going to import that content into that folder. Okay, so my suggestion is that you keep everything in one place so it's neater. Then after you download that content to that folder, you're going to unzip that folder. I use pzip. You're going to use whatever you use. Extract your new folder. And here's the content you'll need for the first handful. Oh, actually, I've got some folders inside of that folder, so we'll have to unzip those as well. And there we go. So I think they updated the content, and you have your AEP, so that's the equivalent of your projects in Adobe Premiere, and then you have your assets, okay? So each time I'll be referencing those in your projects. And the first set here, sample files 1 through 10, are content that you'll find, is content that you'll find from the Adobe website, okay? And they're usually a little bit smaller as far as size. I think they work at like 720 by 480. So they're a little bit smaller as far as downloadability. A lot of times you can actually work in After Effects, and it won't be quite as much of a load on your system. With video, you're doing lots of, with video editing, you're going to be working with lots of content. With motion graphics, you're working with smaller elements. So you're doing incremental edits like 15 seconds or 20 seconds or a minute. And I'm going to talk about the difference between After Effects and Premiere in a second. So it's not going to be quite as intimidating or as much of a drain on your system and on your storage. So sample files 1 through 10, you'll be getting from the Adobe website, and then all these down here: rotoscoping, shaky video, removing unwanted elements, remove object from video, logo animation reveal, text bubble exercise. All of these down here will take you to, let's click on one so you can see, we'll take you to the Google Drive. And once again, you'll download these as a zip folder, install them on your computer. And once you have the resources, you'll be able to do those assignments. Or actually, these will be exercises here. And then let's look at your assignments. So the way it's going to work is that you'll have exercises that are going to be turned in at the end of every other module or so. And so the idea is that once you finish module 1, you'll just turn in any exercise from module 1, and you'll upload it to I'm going to show you how to render your assignment. And then once you render your assignment, you'll upload it to YouTube, and then you'll send us the link, and that will unlock the next assignment or next module. And so there's the exercises that you need. Let's go back to modules, and you'll see that when you get down to the end, if you start here on module 1, you get all the way through module 1, and then down here it says turn in any exercise from module 1 basics. All right, just export and turn in any one exercise from module 1 basics. I'm going to say that again. Just turn in any one exercise from module 1 by uploading it to your YouTube channel and embedding the link there. Okay, and then once you do that, it will unlock the next module. Okay, and so the modules are divided into well, it's divided into modules. So one is After Effects Basics, which we're going to start covering tonight. 2 is animating with keyframes. So most of this is going to be the motion graphics part of the course, and understand the basics of some concepts behind animation, working with shapes and solid layers. and then various types of After Effects skills like using track mats, pre-comps, blending modes, contour, fill. Then we're going to do a lot with graphic, well, I call it graphic extras. So this is stuff like working with time remapping, warp stabilization, reversing animation, more work with pre-comps, bubble up, some exercises, color correction, motion sketch. And then what you'll see is at the end of this chapter, you have to, once again, just turn in any one exercise from this module to unlock the next one. Next, you have Chroma key, Rotoscope, masking, and puppet tools. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here. So you're gonna learn how to create a green screen or chroma key effect, how to do some rotoscoping, how to do some different types of really cool mask animations, how to work with the puppet tool. And then there's a 3D motion tracking, cameras and lights. And so I'm gonna show you how to do some motion tracking and how to work with 3D elements, 3D cameras and lights. And right when I finished this chapter, they had updated and changed the way that 3D worked in After Effects. So I'm gonna have to go back and do this module. So it's some of the stuff in here is different. They've changed it right after I finished this. They changed some of the how the 3D elements work. So that's your 3D elements and tracking. I want to do something with character animation. I don't really have anything in place yet. So I'm hoping to get that in there for you before the class is over. It won't be mandatory, but I will have content in here. Every once in a while, there are people who are really interested in doing character animation. And what's interesting is how many directors that also do animation. Tim Burton, Wes Anderson, for instance, you know, they both do film, and then they also do animation. So it's kind of a weird crossover there, right?
Will you be using the character animator?
No, this is inside of After Effects. We're not going to use the character animator.
Oh, I didn't know there was a way to animate characters in After Effects.
Yeah. Now, compared to the character animator, it may be crude. If you already know how to use the character animator, you'll probably want to stick with that. But I want to do a little bit on doing some animation, some character animation in After Effects. After Effects, of course, would probably pale in comparison compared to the character animator. Exporting from After Effects, and then some advanced ideas with moving between After Effects and Premiere using the Adobe Media Encoder, how to export an After Effects project, and work a little bit with things like expression. So After Effects has its own coding language, which is like doing any other kind of coding. So give you an idea of how all that works. And then your projects for After Effects, right? These are examples of the projects that we're going to do in After Effects. You're going to have samples and examples of how that's done. This is just some ideas about some really cool title sequences. I always like to put in some samples and examples of really cool stuff. So this is professional stuff that I just thought was really cool. I've got some Saul Bass stuff in here and some really good title sequences and stuff. And that's just there to, to wet your whistle. And then I have a section here called student samples and of the different exercises, logo exercise, background animation, 2D animation project, your title sequence, miscellaneous, TV bumper, PSA, storyboards, rotoscope, or chroma key. So I do have examples of all that we will look at. And then I have the Adobe Audition course in there. If you didn't get a chance to play with that in the other course, you can do it here. And then, of course, just like in all the other classes, I would take your Zoom sessions and post them the next day or the day after online. So if you miss a session or if you want to go back and review something, you can. You'll have to go back and review that on your own and decide how much time it takes for you to get through that. It's easier, I think, to sit through it once than have to go back and sit through it again. I was tripped me out. People wanted to record a live a class, and it's like, well, you're sitting here now. You're gonna have to go back and sit through it again. It's probably more effective to take notes, but the world's changed. How we teach has changed. The fact that we're all doing this electronically and we're recording everything. And so I want to make that available to you so you can access any of the sessions that we've done anytime after the official session is over and review any content. There's some content in here on GarageBand and Audacity, and that is not mandatory. One or two of the other instructors shows people how to shows people how to use GarageBand. I'm not going to bother with that, but I do have information up here on GarageBand if you want to spend time with it. And then if you're on a Mac, it's GarageBand, and the closest to GarageBand that we have on the PC is Audacity. So I have a link to GarageBand. So, but there will be no assignments using GarageBand or Audition. All the assignments will be driven from After Effects. And then once again, I have resources for you for music and sound effects and loops and software and all kinds of content here. These are just resources. I need to clean this up a little bit, but the idea here is that there's all kinds of links to places where you can get content. You can download videos, you can download loops, you can download music, and the idea is that there's lots of really cool resources for you. And we've already kind of talked a little bit about royalty-free versus free versus copyright-driven content. So I want you to understand where you are when you are working with these various types of media, and when is it appropriate to use something, and when it should be cited. And for the class, of course, you don't have to spend any money, and you can still make some pretty cool stuff. One is that you can always generate content yourself. You can take your cell phone out, you can shoot some video. Lots of times when you're working in After Effects, you'll be working from scratch. And then of course you can go up and you can find websites where you can download content for free. And I'm not asking you to spend money on content. So you can go to websites where you can get free videos like Pexels, or you can go and you can download free music tracks. Free Music Archive. You can go up and you can download free loops, Looperman. All those are listed there, so you don't have to spend any money when you want to create elements for your work. I just finished a book on Walter Merritt. What was interesting about him was every time he needed a sound, he would go out and record it. And so it was really kind of funny because he would he would just get a sound recorder and he's like, I need footsteps. So he would go out and he would record somebody, because back then they didn't have libraries of content like that. You know, if he wanted, you know, to hear a whistle, he'd have to go and record a whistle. If he wanted to get a train train chugging down the track, he'd have to go out and record a train chugging down the track. And then there were libraries for stuff like that, but you would have to go to that place to get that content, that library. And it was very expensive. And now we just have lots and lots of content right at our fingertips. YouTube has a lot of free content too. You go up to YouTube and you do a search and say, I want a whooshing sound, or I want a sound of a lady screaming or something like that. And you'll find content on YouTube that you can download. And I'll show you guys how to do that you can download and use royalty free. There's a Creative Commons type of thing. So those are your resources. The assignments will be, I haven't set up the time of the assignments yet, but the assignments will be due once again the last week of the course. And, you know, you'll have to kind of manage your own time as to when you think you should start on those assignments. I'll give you some heads up. And the whole idea is that the more you learn about After Effects, the better prepared you'll be for turning in those assignments when they're due. That's the lay of the land. Are there any comments about how this is set up?
Oh yeah, do you have the same sort of dates in terms of drop date without
Yeah,
getting your grade?
the way it will work, the way it works is that we have a week before the first census. And at that first census, if it's a situation where there's non-participation, I use the criteria of non-participation, no communication, and no. I look at the person's use of the canvas shell, and if they fail on all three of those, then I drop them on the first census. And then the second census, once again, it's the same things. I look at if they've contacted me and said they want to stay and that they want to do the work, then they won't be dropped. The second census is halfway through the session in 6 weeks. So the second census, I send out a notification. I let people know, hey, this is the second census. If you're doing poorly and you don't think you can make it, then you need to let me know so I can drop you without a grade. After that second census, if you continue on in the class after that second census, then if you don't do well, you'll get a bad grade. So for some people it doesn't matter, for other people it does. So I will announce those dates, the second census and the first census, shortly. I can get that for you. And then of course after that second census, then I have to give you the total number of hours for the course, and then I have to give you a grade based on your performance. So let me see here.
Okay, and then the other question is, in addition to showing us the A type of work that I'm sure you picked out and said, hey, this is great, could you also maybe show us some C type work of students?
No, I didn't really collect a lot of C type work because there wasn't I kind of thought somebody. No, I didn't. I collected the best stuff I saw, so you know that's unfortunate. So you'll have to be aware of the fact that, yeah, it's going to be the stuff that people did really well. Your first census date will be 10/18, which is next Monday, and your second census date will be 11/03. Okay.
Thank you.
It's like, oh, I'm going to show you crummy work. I don't know.
I mean, at least work where there was room for improvement, right? I mean, I understand that you want to show us that, hey, this is really great, and this is what we would like to see, and we understand that not everybody can do this, but here's an example of something that a student done that there certainly was lots of room for.
Well, you have to be the judge of that. I mean, there are some assignments here I think that are less stellar than others that I kept that I thought were, for one reason or another, either gave people a good idea of what was going on, or I thought for one reason or another were worth keeping. So for instance, logo exercise, here's a number of different examples. And of course, I'm looking for things that people can do. So here's one from, let's see here, if that's still valid. Okay, very good. And So there's examples of logo animation. And these are for students, these, you know. Do. So that one was good. I think that it ended a little abruptly. So that's an example of logo exercise. One of your assignments, and what we can do is I can go back later and we can look at samples of some of the other assignments. And then those are all in there, so you guys can go back and take a look at any of them on your own at any other time, whatever you see fit. But yeah, those are some of the better logo exercises from a semester ago. Okay, any questions?
Will the certificate be emailed to us the same, the week, or how long after class ends will we get our certificate?
Yeah, you know, they're doing something really weird where they don't send them to you. You have to request the certificate. And then I think that they can send you something. You have to contact the administration, say you just finished, you know, these 2 courses, and then that you want your certificate. I don't think they're printing them because of COVID. There's a lot of issues with getting the student certificates, but it will be noted that you have, from what I understand, it will be noted that you have achieved one, or acquired one. And I'm not sure how they're actually giving the certificates to people, but you will have on record that you completed the course and was issued a certificate. So it's kind of a weird situation where I'm not really sure if you can go and get one from them. And so it's one of those things that I don't really quite understand how they're doing that. So it will make more sense to just email them a certificate, but they're not doing that. That's their decision.
Well,
So
why don't you check into it and let us all know as a class later on in the course.
okay, I'll do that. All right. Let's start with Adobe After Effects. So once again, you're going to go up to modules, and you're going to start with module 1, Williams After Effects Basics. You're going to download the folder from sample files 01, that will have the content that you'll need. And then you'll start with module 1, After Effects Basics, and just go through each one of these tutorials one after the other. And that will give you the information that you need to proceed forward. And then of course, you can also go back and go through these tutorials as well. And I incorporate a lot of this stuff into what I'm doing as well. So let's look at the After Effects application. We'll start from scratch by launching After Effects. And basically, there's 2 ways to work with After Effects. One is to create a project from scratch, and the other is to import content that you're going to use to edit. Also, let's talk a little bit about the difference between After Effects and Premiere. So the idea with Premiere is that timeline is really has an can be any length that you decide you want it to be. So when you're working in in Premiere, you just drag your clips into the timeline, and the timeline will absorb that and extend to any length of time that you happen to need. When you're working in After Effects, you kind of predetermine how much time you need on the timeline. You can always adjust it up or down, but usually you're working in increments that are very small, maybe a minute or maybe 30 seconds or maybe 2 minutes or less, because you're doing these intense bursts of animation or special effects or rotoscoping, and they're usually short. And so you could use After Effects to do video editing, but it wouldn't be a good use of the After Effects interface. You would want to, if you wanted to do video editing, you would want to use Premiere. And you can do some motion graphics in Premiere. We did some motion graphics in Premiere, but if you really want to do handsome, sophisticated motion graphics, then you would transition into the application called After Effects, okay? So there's a lot of stuff in here, and we're going to take it step by step so that you feel comfortable with using the application. So here is the After Effects window. Sometimes when it comes up, it'll come up with a little composition window where it says new project or project. For some reason, it didn't do that. So there's the idea is that you can have either launch a project you've already started on or create a new project. And one of the first things to understand is that you can have multiple compositions in one project. So like I'm working on my alien space movie right now, and I've got one project, and in that project are about 5 compositions. Every time one of the aliens fires the laser, I put all of that into one composition so that I can share resources and assets between all those different compositions. So you can have a project with multiple compositions. So a composition is your work area, and that work area is an animation, and it could be on top of video, it could be on a blank background, it could be lots of different ways to incorporate that. So here's our interface, and over on the left you have your project area, and this is where you import your content. In the middle you have your composition window. There's 2 ways to start a composition. One is by making a new composition from scratch. The other is pulling a composition from footage. Over on the right you have all of your menus and all of your assets. If you go to Window, Workspace, there's different workspaces. My suggestion right now is just leave it on standard. For now, just leave it on standard. And then as you work, you may need to go up to Window and set that that workspace to various panels depending upon what you're doing. Like if you're working on a motion tracking exercise, or if you're doing something with graphics, you can change that workspace. So right now I'm just going to set that over here, and you'll see this is my my workspace over here, and I can grab these and I can drag these and move them around. So the top here is default workspace. Let's move this out of the way. And then there's one called Learn, and they've got little overview things over here, and that ties into the Adobe. There's standard. There's a small screen one. I'm going to set it back to default. Let's start by importing content. So I can do this 2 ways. One is that I can import content. The other is I can start from scratch. Let's start from scratch first. So I can start a new composition. So I can start a new composition a couple of different ways. One is I can click here to start a new composition. I can go to File, and I can start a new composition. On the composition, new composition, I'm going to click the new composition button. And when I create a comp from scratch, I have to answer a few questions. So what I have to do is decide on the mechanics of my composition. So I can give my composition a name. I'll just call it comp Al. And then I have to choose the settings. So my preset determines the dimension of the screen. My suggestion is to work right now at HD 1080, and then I can either work HD TV 1080 29.97, and 29.97 would be video, your video frame rate is 29.97, it's video frame rate, or HD TV 24 would be the frame rate for film. So my suggestion is to just leave it at HD TV 1080 29.97 until you find a reason why that you wanted a different dimension. So then that determines the width and the height. 1920 by 1080 is 1,920 pixels wide by 1,080 pixels. And I can change that. Let's say I want this to be like an Instagram thing. So I want it to be 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. I can type in here. I can make this 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. Now you see it's set to custom. I'm going to go back in and set that back to HD TV 1080 29.97. Next is pixel aspect ratio. There's actually different types of pixels. And you're just going to more than likely just leave it at square pixel. The frame rate is the speed of the frame, so 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second. 30 frames per second is video, like what you see on television. General Hospital, right? Your game shows. And then 24 frames per second has more of a flicker, so it has more of the look of your film. The resolution, you're going to leave that at full. And then you have what's called a start time code. So that time code can be synchronized with other elements. And then you have the duration, and that's the length of the video or the length of the footage. I'm going to set this to 5 seconds. So if you look here, well, let me turn on my zoom it.
Do you always want us to change the duration to 5 seconds while we're doing these projects?
It will be, it's going to be a variable.
Okay.
So 5 seconds is a good number to start with. I think by default, it will
goes
be
to 30.
It will be 5 seconds.
Okay.
And the reason why it wasn't for me is because I was working on something and I think I changed it somewhere else.
Because mine had
So,
30.
Yeah,
Oh,
you don't need 30 seconds. You
Okay.
rarely ever need 30 seconds in here. And you'll see in a second. It depends on what you're doing. It's relative. But the idea is that, especially at first, and it's really important that you understand how much time you're allotting here. Now you can always change the amount of time you're having, but start with 5 or 10 seconds at the most, you know.
Okay.
So let's click OK. Now, oh, the next thing is the background color. So this background color right now is set to black. You can make the background color any color you want. Now that background color is actually invisible. It's actually transparent. So it's really just the work environment you're looking at. So I'm just going to leave it at black. I'm going to click OK. And what I've done is I've created a composition. So this area here is a composition. This is my work area. Then I have my timeline underneath. And then over on the left, this is where all my content goes and where I receive and edit commands like transform, opacity, where my elements are displayed. So that's one way to start a composition is to know the settings that you need and then input them. Now, let's import some content, and then we're going to go through some basics of understanding the mechanics of the After Effects application and the interface, and then we're going to transition into working with basic tools and doing some basic motion tweening. Okay. So I can import content a number of ways. I can go to File, and I can choose Import, just like you did in Premiere. I can also right-click over here under Project and choose Import, or I can double-click right here, and it will open up my import option. So I'm going to go to the folder where I put my content. I'm going to open Getting Started After Effects. I'm going to open that folder, and I'm just going to import my assets here. And then I'll just kind of step through them and explain to you the different kinds of assets that you can have. I'm just going to import all this at the same time. So one of the cool things about After Effects is that I can work with still footage, I can work with Photoshop documents, I can work with Illustrator documents, I can work with video, I can import content from also, I can work with audio files, I can work with all kinds of different types of content, and I can mix and mash and smash them together. So what I'll do is I need to actually kind of, let me make a note of that. I'm going to do an overview on file types and their properties. Okay, I don't think I have something like that in here. So, so we can work with motion, animation, still frames, graphics, and so it's very open-ended. And how I stitch these things together is really up to you. So if we look here in this particular circumstance at the content that we've imported into here, you see when I drag this open, it tells you the type of file. These are JPEGs. This is this is my comp. So when I create my comp here, it puts it up here in my project. And the reason why is because you can embed comps in comps. We'll talk about that later. It's called pre-comping. I have MP4 files. I have another PSD. I have another MP4 file. I have a WAV file. And I have an Illustrator file, right? So all that content came in here at the same time, right? And then it tells me the type of file. It tells me the size of the file. If there's a frame rate, it tells me the frame rate. If it's a video file, it tells me the duration of the video file. All right. So in this case, I've got a blank composition, and I can import content into the composition a couple of different ways. One is I can grab a video clip or any content, and I can drag it down and place it into my composition by just dragging it down onto the timeline. Excuse me. So I can drag content directly down and undo that. Well, I'll just delete it. Boom. I can also grab it and drag it into my composition window. Right. So when I drag it into the composition window, I can place it somewhere on the screen. So I could grab it and drag it so like in the upper left or something like that. So the video footage seems to be a different length or size than the window. That's okay. I'm going to grab my content. I can also drag it onto the timeline. Drag it onto the timeline. I can have it start somewhere other than the beginning of the timeline. I'm going to undo that. So lots of times, one of the ways that you'll start is to create a composition from scratch. The other way is to import composition or import a piece of footage and start with the dimensions of that piece of footage. That will be explained in due time. So I'm going to grab this and drag it and drop it onto the timeline. Okay. So let's look at this area over here. And there's a bunch of buttons in here. There's lots of buttons everywhere. And at first it's overwhelming. We're just going to take it step by step. I'm going to introduce to you a few buttons at a time. And as the class goes on, we'll learn more and more ways to modify and edit. So if I come down here, one, I have a visibility icon, right? So that makes whatever's on the screen visible or invisible. Two, I can toggle on and off the audio if there is audio. This solos a layer. So if there's a layer, more than one layer, and I just want to isolate one layer, I click the little dot there and that will solo a layer. And this locks the layer. So if I lock the layer, I don't have to worry about accidentally editing its content. This little triangle here is really important. There's lots of little buttons everywhere. That little button there will allow me to toggle down and see every layer has elements that are attached to it, and I can attach additional presets and modifications to that, like tracking or keying or stylize or whatever the case may be. So you'll see that there is an audio track here, and then there's also a transform. So that transform allows me to do things like adjust the anchor point, the position, the scale, the rotation, the opacity of this object. Now, when I do it without clicking on the stopwatch, it's going to do it over the whole clip. So if I grab this and I change its scale, I've scaled the whole piece of video, but if I do it over time, then it's an animation. So if I start the stopwatch, it's going to insert a keyframe, and then if I go over to say a second, and then I modify that element, I've created an animation because it's going to do that over time. All right. So I can scrub through my timeline by clicking and dragging the scrubber. I can also hit the space bar to start and stop my animation. And then there's some different ways I can look at the timeline. So this is important to understand. One is the duration of the whole timeline itself. And you see down here at the end that this is set to 5 seconds, right? And I can grab this and I can look at more or less frames. So now I'm looking at individual frames, 2 frames, 4 frames, 6 frames. So I can change the amount of time I'm looking at by grabbing that top bar there and dragging it, okay? Now this next bar down here is the time ruler, and that allows me to set my overall animation. That's my work area. So if I drag this to here, I've truncated the amount of part of this is the part of the project I plan to export, is this area within here. I can also use this to isolate and track an animation. So lots of times when you're working in After Effects, you'll do little increments, and then you'll test it. So if I do my animation, and then if I play the animation and I bring it inside of these handles, it's going to loop inside of this area, right? If I start the animation outside of that spot, then it'll play over the whole animation. All right, but if I bring my cursor inside of there, I can loop. So I say, I want to test this part of the animation. I'm just going to drag it to there. And then that's going to loop. Okay. Let's drag it back over. Oh, you can also grab it like this and check different portions. So I'm going to make it to full length again. So you'll see little arrows on the end. This bar here is the video right here. This is my video. And I can actually grab this and I can shorten or lengthen it as well. It's not letting me grab it. Anyway, you usually can. I'm doing something wrong. And that's how you input content on your timeline. Now, let's look at organizing your content up here. So one, I can make folders just like I do in Premiere. So down here at the bottom here, I have a little folder button. And I can make a folder. And when you have the more content you have, the more organized you'll need to be. So let's say I want to make a folder and call it stills. And then I'll make another folder and call it video. And then I'll make another folder and call it graphics. Okay. Then I can take my content and move it into those folders to organize this. Let's put the graphic into there. Let's put the videos into this one. And then let's put the stills into this one. I just drag it inside. And these are videos, so I'll move those in here. And stills in here. And then I can open and close these. And I don't have a folder for my audio, so let's make another folder for audio. Now I'll move that into audio. And then here's my comp. Okay, so you see the comp name right there. You see your timeline here. And you see your scrubber, and you have your whole element here. And then you have your ability to modify and add content here. Then you have the little scrubber down here as well. Once again, I can change the length of time that I'm currently looking at. Down in the lower left-hand corner are some buttons here that I want you to be aware of as well, which toggles switches and modes. Most of the time, you're going to probably leave it on the mode you're in right here, but I can also use collapse and expand that menu for additional tools. And so I can expand that out for things like my track mat and my blending modes. Okay, so we'll get into working with that later. Let me throw this away for a second. And what I want to do is I'm just going to create an element by typing on the screen. I'll grab my type tool. I'm going to click on the screen. And so when I click on the screen with my type tool, we're going over to tools in a second. I have the option of choosing a font, choosing the color, choosing the size. Let's make it white. And then I'll increase the size, and then I'll type in something. And once again, what I've done is I've created an element, and I want to kind of go through some of the ideas here. So one is the magnification. So usually what you'll do is you'll work at fit, and fit makes everything fit on screen. And then I can grab it and I can expand this when I'm working, right? When I need to open this up and I have lots and lots of layers, I can make it smaller, or I can grab and drag it like this, but I can also set it to say 33% or 200% if I need to get in really close, fit up to 100%, usually what I have it set to by default. You have various grid and guide options, title, action, or safe. And I forgot to mention this in the other class, is that whenever you're doing titling, turn on this safe And then the idea with this title safe is that you want your titles to fit within these grids so that it'll one, it won't go off the edge of the screen depending on the dimensions of the screen, and two, it's more aesthetically pleasing. So I have my title safes. I have some various proportional grids, which is helpful because what you will want to do is line things up for other things. There is another super grid here, right, which is really cool for when I'm trying to line things up and get things. Of course, these will not be visible. And then I can even turn on rulers and create guides, right? Just like you do in Photoshop if you've ever used, excuse me, if you ever used Photoshop. And I'm going to turn all those off for now. Okay, so here's a piece of text on the screen, and what I want to do is I want to animate this piece of text. So, oh, let me show you this too. There's a button over here. This button here is toggle transparency grid. So you'll see that right now the background is black, but the background really isn't black. It's transparent. It's just showing it as black because we requested it to say, hey, when you're showing us the background, make it black, right? So that way you're not staring at that, right? Transparency, but really it's transparent. And I can turn that on and off. Now there's other stuff in here like active camera. We'll get into cameras towards the later part of the course. All right, so let's go through some ideas about tools. So you already saw me use the type tool. When I click on the type tool, it brings up your traditional character palette and paragraph palette, and I can make the same adjustments in here I make in Photoshop. I can add a drop shadow. I can add, I can take the text and I can stretch it. I can fill it with a color. I can do all that kind of stuff to my text. I can select it, right? I can change its size, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Tools. Let's go over each of the tools one by one. So I'm going to click away from the text, deselect it. And the first tool is your selection tool. So that's the one that you'll use to grab stuff. So if I click on this, the text has been selected, right? I can grab it and I can stretch it, right? If I wanted to, I could just grab it and stretch it, right? And I can click inside of it and I can position it or move it, right? Now, some ideas about positioning and moving. Depending on how you want to animate it, you'll see this little control point right here. And that's where that thing is going to be moved or rotated. So right now, if I were to rotate this, I'll go down to transform and I hit rotation, you'll see it's rotating from that point at the very end there. So I can change that rotate. Let's say I want to rotate it from the center. What I have to use is a button up here. This button here is called Behind Anchor Point tool. So I click on that. I grab that anchor point and I position it. Let's say I want to put it right in the middle. And now when I move or rotate, it's going to rotate from the center. So I can do things like that. So I can, I'm going to put that in the point right there. So when I spin it, it's going to be spun from the center out, for instance. Another thing that's helpful is aligning objects. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to align, and I'm going to click the align, and I want to align the layers to the composition, and I'm just going to align it horizontally. So now it's aligned horizontally, vertically, and horizontally, right? So I can do things like that. So now I've got this set up where I can do some basic animation or motion graphics. And the cool thing is that it's a very simple system for animating. It has a lot of really cool features, and it's very flexible. And it's basically the idea of using keyframes. So keyframes, the concept of keyframes goes all the way back to, does anybody know?
Film?
Close, animation. So animation is a tedious, time-consuming process. Doesn't matter if you're using a pen and paper, if you're using a camera, if you're using clay, if you're using a computer. It's probably the world's greatest time suck. So be aware of the fact that animation is a very intensive process. Lots of times, say a lot of these methods were actually started with Disney, and what you had was an artist that was a keyframer that would draw the keyframes of an animation. And then you would have an in-betweener that would draw the stages in between the keyframes. So let's say you've got Mickey Mouse and he's walking along. That's keyframe 1. Keyframe 2 is him slipping a banana. And keyframe 3 would be him falling and hitting his head. That would be keyframe 1, 2, and 3. And then another artist called an in-betweener would draw the frames between him walking and slipping and him slipping and falling. So we still use the concept of keyframes in animations. We used keyframes in Premiere when we moved the graphics and the text and shapes on the screen. It works pretty much the same here. And the idea is that you can manually move objects around the screen. Sometimes you'll have to, but a lot of times all you have to do is set up an initial keyframe and an end keyframe and make a difference between one of those two for a different parameter, say the scale of an object or the rotation of an object or the position of an object. And the computer will transition from keyframe A to keyframe B. And then you can add additional keyframes on at the beginning or at the end and modify and transition the amount of time it takes to transition from one keyframe to the next. And after you understand that, you've got a whole lot of the mechanics of what happens in After Effects under your belt.
What about Adobe Animate? Do you teach a class on that, or is there a need for that if we're already using After Effects?
You know, I don't have much knowledge on Adobe Animate. And I don't teach a class on it. And it's one of those things that I'm curious about, but I just really haven't had time to crack it open and play with it. I think that's more for traditional like character animation type stuff. And then what we're doing here is more titling and sequencing and motion graphics and rotoscoping and green screening and integrating that with video. So is there a place for it? Yes. How would I squeeze that in here? Barely have enough time to do what we're doing now. People are complaining about how much time they have to do what we're doing. So it'd be cool to integrate something like that into here, but I don't know where it would fit. Because actually the next thing that I think that I would want to do would be to do audio with the Audacity application. So so yeah, there's a couple of really cool additional tools in After Effects in Adobe, but yeah, I don't know how I'd squeeze that in. So there's definitely, if you're doing character animation, it's probably better for that than what we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can see probably that working better for character animation than.
Right. Yeah. Let me take a note of that. So Adobe Character Animate. It's got it right in the title, right?
There's a character animator tool, and it looks so complicated. I don't even know what's the point.
Yeah, well, see, there's a whole history to that. What happened was, once upon a time, there was a tool called Flash. And Flash was a lot like After Effects and the Adobe Character Animator. And then they had a computer language as well called Flash Script. So some people used it for animation, some people used it for programming, and they would do web stuff with it. And it was around for a long time. There it is. You got your Adobe Flash book, huh? I still miss Flash, you know. It was a really cool application. It was a really powerful application. And it was like it was a must-have for a long time. And then what happened was Adobe and Apple actually at one point in time partnered together on projects. So Adobe and Apple actually worked together early on in both of the companies' careers. They were partnered, but now they're not necessarily friends anymore. And the non-acceptance of Flash elements in Apple devices was one of the death knells of Flash, and Flash died. It no longer was as useful. It became obsolete. And all things become obsolete over time. And so they broke the suite up into a bunch of other applications. One of them was the Adobe Character Animate. So it has a lot of the elements in there are very similar to Flash. So it would be cool to teach, but the problem is, I don't know if there's enough students that want to do traditional character animation. So I don't think Jeffrey's in here. I should have let Jeffrey speak while he was here, but I'll have him come back and explain to you his assignments, and he'll give you some ideas of how you're going to be doing the assignments. And then of course, there are video clips for everything that you'll need to do. And everything I'm covering right now is in your video, is in those lectures. So those that first group of lectures that you saw in module 1 is what I'm covering right now. Now, let me ask you guys a question. You guys let me know what you think. Would it make sense? Would you like me to do this differently? Would you like to open up After Effects and then all of us go through this together, and then we stop, and I'll let you work for a few minutes, and then we'll continue, and then we'll stop, and then I can see what you're doing on screen and make suggestions or comments? Or would you rather it simply just be lecture driven? So what I've been doing, the way I've been doing my classes is I do lectures, and you sit and watch, and then you practice and play later on your own. Would you rather me incorporate all of us, say for instance, opening up After Effects and follow along with me right now? What do you guys want to do?
No. Yeah, because there's so much information that I would like you to go over, and if we're following along and taking time to do things on our own, it's twice as long, and we won't even touch half of the things that you'd like to cover.
I agree with that.
Okay, so anybody else?
I'm just trying to follow along. I'm so new with this software completely, that I'm going through it and I'm taking notes, but I have mine up. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I've got a multi-screen and I'm trying to go through it, and I'm not as quick, but like I got lost when you had you were doing the text, and I'm sorry, I'm really trying to keep up. I have the stills, I have all those folders labeled.
All right, so here's a question. So there's two ways to do this. Usually my contention, and then you guys let me know what you think, because this is just as much your class as it is mine. One, yeah, not sure if my computer is zooming After Effects at the same time anyway.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, so one is, don't try to use After Effects right now. Just watch me and follow along and just take notes, and then open up After Effects after the class is over or later on and use the videos in the canvas to emulate what I'm doing here now. So if you're trying to watch me and do it on screen, you're gonna keep getting lost. Now, the other way to do it would be that all of us open up After Effects and we work up to a certain point, we stop, and then we check to see if everybody's with me before we move forward. But I think that way you'd have to, it would have to work if everyone agreed to do that together. So those are the two options. So which do you think is better for you? Which would you prefer, to just hear the lecture and watch me work? Or do you want to open up After Effects, work along with me, stop, and then we check to see where everybody is?
I would rather the first one, because we're not all at the same level, and so the people who are struggling, it's gonna really stretch the class out.
I wouldn't say struggling. I would say that we are people who are probably new.
Yeah.
So I know that there's a lot of people here who have a background in it,
Yeah.
and I don't. I don't. I'm a writer. I'm a ghost writer. So I've never seen this before. So I wouldn't say struggling. I mean, maybe take a poll as to how many people have done this before or do this for a living. That might be helpful.
Okay. All right. So let's just continue on with the mode we're currently in. All right. And like I said, no one's taken me up on it this semester, but there are lab hours. Okay. And I try to communicate on a regular basis, at least once a week, with all the students. I send out announcements, etc. If you are stuck, you need help, or you don't, it's something that you need assistance with, schedule time anytime outside of class, outside of the regular 3 hours we do tonight, each night, with me whenever you're available, and I can sit with you and help you with any issues or problems that you're having. Does that make sense? Does everybody understand that? So anytime you have, if there's something you don't get, I don't understand how to do a mask, or I don't know how to do a track man, or I'm having problems with basic motion tweening, or I'm having, whatever it happens to be, can you explain to me rotoscoping again? I'm still not sure how that works. I'll make that time is yours. Okay, I've allotted it in my schedule. And so one of the things that kind of tripped me out the last 5 weeks is I don't think anyone, not one person ever contacted me out, and I made sure that you guys knew that, which is okay. If you didn't need the help, you didn't need the help. Maybe you guys were fine, So that's part of this course. Okay, that's the difference between doing this and like a correspondence course, where there's just a bunch of videos online, and if you get stuck, you get stuck. I don't know if anyone's ever taken that kind of class. I know I have, right? But this is different. This is supposed to emulate a true classroom experience, good and bad.
Do you think we can take a 10-minute bathroom break then?
Yes, yes, sir. I was just about to suggest that. Let's do, actually, I wanted to start at 6:45. Let's start it at, let's start now, and then we'll come back at, what time? 5 after 7? Sound like a plan?
Works for me.
Okay, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and finish up our first session with Adobe After Effects. Very good. Okay, everybody back from break?
I am.
Very good. All right, let's continue. So let's talk about our tools. We're going through our tools. And right now, what I want to do is talk about, we went through the idea of aligning objects. And we also looked at the pan behind anchor point tool, which has got to be the longest name for a tool on Earth. And often what you'll need to do before you start your animation is set where you want the orientation of the animation to originate with that pan behind anchor point tool. we have some other tools. One is to zoom in and out, right? I can zoom in and then Alt click to zoom out. We have a rotation tool. So there's a couple of different ways to rotate. I can rotate from there, and I can also rotate from the rotation tool here. And we looked at the pan behind anchor point tool, and I'm going to come back to the rectangle and the pen tool in just a second. Let's do a quick animation here. So lots of times what I do is animate going backwards. So I'll start where I want the object to end up and then move it off screen. So it's easier to have it where you want it to end up and then animate off. So let's set this timeline. Let's find a second here. So I'm going to go to a second here. So let's look at the way the time works here. Make sure you understand this. So if you look here at this, we're doing 29.97 per second. This is hours. This is minutes. This is seconds. And this is frames. Okay. Same thing here. Hours, minutes, seconds, and frames. Right. And so lots of times when you're animating, especially the first part of the course, you're only going to be doing 5-10 seconds of animation, right? So I've set this, I'm going to grab the scrubber and I'm going to set it to 1 second. And what I want to do is I'm going to set a keyframe. Now, if I position or move this object right now without setting a keyframe, for instance, if I scale this object, it's scaled over the whole, it's scaled without being animated. It's just a scale. But if I set the timing on that object, I'm scaling it over time. So for instance, I'll set the stopwatch at this point in the animation at 100%. And then I will go to the beginning of the animation and I will set it to 0. And now I have something like this, right? So I'm going to undo that. So I can animate any element over time. So I'm going to set the position of the object by clicking on the stopwatch. And when I click the stopwatch on this keyframe, I'm positioning a keyframe there. And then I'll scrub over to the beginning and I'm going to change the position of the stopwatch. I don't have to do anything else but change the position of the object. So if I grab it, I'll grab my move tool and I can just grab it and I can drag it off stage. And I've gotten an animation. I'm going to undo that. Now, I can do it a couple of different ways. One is I can just click on it and drag it. If I hold down the shift key, it'll snap to vertical and horizontal, right? And I hit the space bar to play it. And the cool thing about this is that after I set up those keyframes, I can modify them. So let's say I want this animation to happen sooner. I can grab those keyframes, I can drag them, and now the animation is going to happen faster. And what makes the animation move quickly is the amount of time between one stage and the other, and the number of frames. And between those two, I can change this. So the cool thing is that I can grab these. They're incredibly malleable as to where I move these keyframes for my animation. Okay. And then I can add additional frames in as well. Now, if I click the stopwatch, it'll erase all the animations that are there. But if I want to add another one in, I can just grab it, drag it to a new position, and then change the position. Now, other ways that I can change the position of the object is with these little increments right here. So if I click over the first one, that's left and right. And if I click and see that I'm moving that object left or right, so now it's going to go like so. Let's say I want it, instead of it looping, I want it to stop. I'll come over a few frames and I'll click the position key again. So now it's going to stop there. And then I'll go over a few more frames and then I'll drag it off to the right. So now you see the difference is that before it was kind of looping, and now it's going to stop and then it's going to off like that. So I can add in as many frames as I want, and then I can transition the frames or change the length between the keyframes. I can grab a bunch of keyframes and drag them together. And then I can also do other things, like if I hold on the Alt key and drag, I can drag them by keeping the proportionate differences between them the same. Right? So those are some ideas about what's called a basic motion tween. And that's one of the things that you'll spend a lot of time with. And I'm going to show you some other things that you'll need to learn about motion blur and some other features that we'll get into eventually. All right, so here what we did, we just animated some text on the screen. Let's look at the shapes tool. So the shapes, there's a number of shapes here: rectangle, rounded rectangle, polygonal, etc. And there's two ways to use those shapes. One, if I'm going to collapse this for now, if this layer is selected and I grab one of these shapes and I drag over it, I'm creating a mask. So you see how the text is moving through that mask. Actually, the mask is attached. Or I took that and undid it. If I deselect that layer and I draw a shape, it's a shape. So I can use this two ways. One is to create shapes, and the other is to create masks. So when I create the shape, I have the properties of the shape, and these are similar to the properties that you would see in Illustrator. So one is I have a fill, and I can click on the word fill, to modify the fill. So one is I can choose not to have a fill, or I can have a fill with a solid color. And I click on the next box to choose the color. I can have a fill with a gradient, or a linear gradient, or a radial, right? So let's say I just want a solid color. I choose that, I click OK, and then I can choose the color I want for that fill. So two ways to use that shapes tool. One is to select the layer, and when I click and draw into the layer, I'm creating a mask element. The other way to do it is to make sure nothing is selected, and when I draw with that shape tool, it's going to create a shape on the screen. I also have the properties of a stroke. So right now there is no stroke. Right now there is no stroke, but I can add one. So if I click on the next button over, that's a solid color stroke. And then I can adjust the opacity of the stroke as well. And then I can increase the thickness of the stroke, right? So I can have a shape with a fill and a stroke, or just a stroke, or just a fill. If I didn't want the fill, I could take the fill off, or I can make the fill active. And I can also make a fill that's got a gradient in it. And once again, I click here to determine the gradient. So if you've ever done any work in Photoshop or Illustrator with fill and stroke and none, this will all seem very familiar to you. I can add in additional stroke values and so on in my animation, right?
Can we add a color palette? Like, for example, if we're working with a template or a customer that has certain colors for their company, and we have to stick within those colors.
Oh yeah, so you see you're working, so this is not for print, right? So your palette's going to be, you're going to call out your numbers in either HSB or RGB. So if you can get the or the hexadecimal value for web, and so if you can identify the color in one of those, then you can punch in exactly what color you want by using one of these systems. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but there's no way to save the information.
No, you just get a sheet of paper, and this is what I do. I say,
I know. I'm
Four-
just, I
four
just thought
screen.
there was maybe a way to save it. You know, like when you're working with PowerPoint, how you can save your custom colors in PowerPoint, but I guess not. It doesn't work the same. Mhm.
Well, you can always sample a color later, but
Yeah, okay.
yeah. I
Are
mean,
you asking about swatches? Does it have like a swatch palette?
Yeah, something like that.
no. I've never seen one. I've never run across one. So, but you just sample it, write down the values, input them. I don't think it's that critical. Yeah, I've never seen a swatch type of thing in here. Yeah, like Illustrator has. But you can import your colors from Illustrator. So you can do that in Illustrator and import it. So you can use elements like that, save libraries.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Let me delete this shape. So I can animate this shape independently of that other thing, right? So the cool thing about this shape is that I have a bunch of different options here. So I have the ellipse. I can animate the ellipse, the stroke, the gradient. I can, anything that's in here can, just about anything in here can be animated. So if you click here and you see a little stopwatch next to it, it means it can be animated. So I can animate the size, the position, the color, the opacity, the stroke width, any of these elements. And we'll do some of that stuff. It's kind of cool. You can create some really interesting effects with the individual elements of the shape itself that can be animated. And then in addition to that, these are all the properties under the ellipse. You also have the properties for the transform of the whole shape. So once again, I can change its scale or position. So I'll click the scale button to make it what size it is. And then I'll go over a handful of frames and I'll scale it down. And you'll see that I can have multiple animations at the same time. Let's change its position. So let's set a keyframe here, and I'll just set it to where it is now, and then I'll have it move off screen or something. So you see how you can create some very cool animations with multiple layers and objects in After Effects with that keyframing. We're setting up the keys and then animating them over time. Let me delete that. Now, the other thing is your pen tool. So the pen tool allows you to do a whole bunch of different types of things. One is to do some precision drawing. There's also a paintbrush. You have to activate a special mode to paint into each frame, but it can be done. Once again, if that layer is, let me go to a frame where this is on the screen, where that if that layer is selected like it is right now, and I draw with that pen tool, I'm creating a mask, right? And that mask, I can animate the mask and the shape, and I can have it add or subtract or intersect or whatever the case may be. And so this is really cool because lots of times when you're doing effects, you'll mask stuff. We'll mask one element out of another. So like one of the scenes from my latest movie, I got a spaceship and it comes up out of the mountains. And so what I did was I put the spaceship on the ground in front of the mountains and had it animate up. And then I made a mask over the mountains and put that on top of the spaceship. So it looks like the spaceship is coming up behind the mountains instead of in front of it, right? So you can do all these different types of things. We create all kinds of really cool animations by having stuff come out or being hidden behind a mask. You can also do things with transparency and squash and stretch. And so those are some common principles that you'll see, and Jeffrey will spend some time on those as well. When you are working with animation, principles like squash and stretch and a bunch of others that will come into play that you can incorporate into your animations in After Effects. So here I've created a mask and I can choose how that mask is used. And then you can do different things with the mask. You can feather the edges of a mask, right? I can do stuff like that. I can adjust the opacity of a mask and all kinds of stuff. Now, if I'm going to delete that mask, and if I grab that pen tool and I don't have the layer selected, and I draw with the pen tool, then it's just a shape that I'm working with, that I'm creating on the screen. And once again, that shape, oh, I think I drew into the layer. Let me turn that off, make sure it's not active. And now I'll draw. So now that's, once again, that's a shape that I can deploy or use. And once again, I can animate each one of these control points. I can animate the whole shape or different aspects of the shape, right? And the way this works is whatever's on top is what I'm going to see on the top. So they stack up. So I can always grab these elements and drag them on top or underneath one another. Okay, and then I can grab my move tool and reposition them wherever I want them on the screen or whatever the case may be. Okay, and I can have as many layers as I want. And then later on, what you'll see is that there's different ways to take these elements and turn them into 3D objects. I can take animations and I can copy the keyframes from one to another. You know, so if I come down here to the After Effects animations, the transform, and I select those and I copy them, Control C, Command C, and then I click into the shape layer, hit Command or Control V. I've pasted the animation from one into the other. Let's see here if I got that in. Let's see if it works. There it is, see? So I've taken the animation from one and I've pasted it into the other. So there's lots of cool things that you can do. It's an incredibly flexible system with the way that animation, those keyframes work. And we'll spend a lot of time with those keyframes. So we've gone through our action or selection tool, zoom in, and then after I zoom in, I have my hand tool, allows me to push around, and I can double click to reset or set it to fit up to 100%. I can change the amount of the screen I'm looking at by dragging it up and down. I can change the percentage of the screen I'm looking at. I can choose to see the background or turn that background off. Okay. I have my rotate tool on the top as a tool and also as one of my transforms. I have my pen behind anchor point tool, and the idea with that is that I want to change the orientation of where my objects are on the screen. I have my pen tool, and then once again, what I'm going to do is, I know some people, if you've taken Illustrator or Photoshop, you may already be, okay, you may already be familiar with how to use the pen tool. If you're not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a little mini module on how to work with the pen tool, so that if you feel deficient in that, you can take that and work with it outside of the regular class time. So that people, if you're not feeling comfortable with working with the pen tool, I'll do a little exercise on it. And I'll have that included somewhere in the course. I haven't done it yet, but I know sometimes people feel good about using it. Okay, so let's continue. And then we looked at the type tool, and I looked at the type tools that you're going to add type to your screen. Then there's horizontal and vertical. And when I click on the screen, I can simply type in a word. And then I can select that, and I can choose a font. I can choose a size. Okay. Et cetera, et cetera. fill over stroke, stroke over fill. Okay. Brush tool we'll cover separately. Clone stamp tool, it works. It doesn't work the way you might think it would. It's not as important a tool in After Effects as some of the other elements. There is an eraser, but once again, you don't. Well, it's less important depending on, unless you're doing like some really, like you're doing frame by frame animation, and we'll show you how to do some of that later. Then we also have a Roto Brush tool, and we'll learn how to do Rotoscope and Roto Animation. And then there's also a puppet pin position pin tool, which we'll learn how to do as well. In addition to that, you also will have various palettes, for instance, effects and presets, and there are thousands of different types of effects and presets that I can apply to my shapes on the screen that do things like color correction, create keys. I can do different types of stylizations. There's a bunch of effects for text. We're going to take you through all those different ways to work with and edit your keyframe animation. Let's take a second here. And one of the first things I want to do, let me zoom out a little bit. So if I zoom out, then I can look at this animation. Let's say I want to make that shape go all the way off the screen. So that last keyframe, I'm going to change the position a little bit. There we go. So now I've got this little animation here. I've got the word After Effects. Let's have the word After Effects come in from a different direction. Okay, so now I've got this little animation here. Okay, so let's say that this is, I'm happy with this. I like this. Let's have it. Let's have that other shape disappear off the screen at the top too. Right, so you see I'm just clicking. I can type in an increment, or I can just click in here and I can drag these off the screen from one side to the other. So let's set this to fit up to 100%. Let's play through our animation. So let's say that's going to stay on the screen. That's going to fly off. Okay. So let's say now I'm finished with my animation and I want to export this. First thing I'm going to do is let's look at the composition timeline. So this animation, I'm only using up about 2 seconds of animation, right? So this other 3 seconds is useless. I don't need that. So I can do one of two things. One is I can grab this little bar here and I can drag it like this, right? And now when I play through it, I'm only playing the part that's on the screen. The other thing I can do is after I've truncated like this, is I can go to composition and I can say trim comp to work area. And so now I've gotten rid of all that extra frames and I've made the whole animation 2 seconds. Now I can also add area to the timeline anytime I want. If I go to composition and I go to composition settings, and you'll see it shows me what the duration is right here, and I just change that number. And if I increase the number, I'm adding more frames onto the end of my animation. And so now I've added it back in, and I've added in those additional frames. I have to grab the scrubber and drag it so you can see that additional 5 seconds here, or 3 seconds that I've added. And so I can, generally what you want to do is only add in when you need it, and then keep it light and modify it. And when you're done, truncate it. So I'm going to grab that, I'm going to drag that to there. And one is you can have more than one composition. Right now, we only have one composition. You can have multiple compositions. And then later on, I'll show you how to link or pre-comp animations into additional other animations. And so that's something that is a really powerful utility. And then you can share resources between different compositions, and I can have multiple compositions in one project or one. So I'm going to save the project, save as, and I'll just call this project A. And I'll put it into my folder. And so that's the AEP file. That's my project file. And that project file will allow me to open this back up and continue my work from where I've left off. So I saved the project file. That's going to keep all the resources and assets in here. And whatever's on the timeline will also be on the timeline. And now what I want to do is I want to export you're going to render, just like you do in Adobe Premiere, you're going to render the files to a format that can be used elsewhere. So I could render this to an MP4 or a .mov file. One of those will work, and that's going to be an animation. And then I'll go through all the different options for exportation as the class goes on. But for now, when you finish your exercises at the end of the module and you need to upload this to your YouTube channel to post your work, you just go to composition and you're going to choose add to render queue. And this brings up the render queue. And this is where I render my work. Okay, so there's a few different settings in here. One is the output module. Just leave it on lossless, right? I can change that, right? So if I click where it says lossless here, it allows me to choose the format. My suggestion is either AVI or QuickTime, which will make it an MP4 or a QuickTime movie. Leave it on AVI. And then I'll come back into the idea of video output later. I can render with RGB or with RGB plus alpha. We'll get to that later. And I can resize it too, but don't. Just leave it at its current settings. So I've set that to custom AVI. Next is what I want to output to. And so right here, you can choose the comp folder and name or just the folder. So I'm going to click there. And then I choose where I want the object to be stored. What did I name this folder? Okay. And then I give the file a name. In this case, it's going to be an AVI. I click save, and we'll go into more detail later. But that's good enough for now, right? And then I come over here and I click render, and it's going to render the animation. Depending on how much RAM you have, it may be faster or slower than that. And then if I go to that folder, I've created an animation. And there it is. And then what you'll do is you'll take that project, right? And you will where's my class? You will upload it, and for each, so at the end of this chapter, After Effects Basics, you just take any animation that you've done while you're experimenting with the basic tools, Keyframe Animation. We're going to go over animate position, size, rotation, and then we'll start working on easy ease and motion blur and the graph editor tomorrow. And then you're just going to take any one of those little motion tween animations that you've done and upload it for your first exercise, and that will unlock the next exercise. And you just continue transitioning down, and you learn more content as the class goes on.
When you publish it, does it automatically publish with a black background, or is that a transparent background?
It's gonna publish it with a black background. Now, later on, I'll show you how to manage that feature, because you can do it a couple of ways. One is you can publish it with whatever the background color is, or you can publish it with a transparency in the background. So if I wanted to, let's say I create like a lower third animation, and I wanted to drop that into Premiere, I can go into the menu. So right now the background is transparent here. If I go to Custom AVI, I have to re-render it again. Let's go to Composition. Let's go back to Comp, then I go to Composition, Add to Render Queue, and if I go to here, and
It's not showing your screen.
oh, let me show the screen. So I've set up another render. I'll start over. So I go to Comp, Composition, Add to Render Queue. I click here for Output Mode. And if I come here to Channels, RGB is going to print that background. If I choose RGB plus alpha and I export this, it's going to make that background transparent. Okay. Now, if I export it now, it'll still look black, but if I import it into Premiere, it'll actually be transparent. And so when I set it up like that, I can export the content and make it transparent, and then import that into Premiere and layer that on top of other footage. And so we'll work with going back and forth between Premiere and After Effects, and I'll show you a bunch of different ways to embed After Effects projects in Premiere and vice versa. And there'll be a number of different techniques for exporting your After Effects projects so that you can use them in Premiere. And some of them are cool, like with some features like embedded or some dynamic linking features where I can modify it in After Effects and then see it updated in Premiere, which are very helpful. And then show you how to take assets, like if I create a lower third, how to turn that into a pre-comp and then modify the pre-comp so I can reuse that pre-comp, that one pre-comp over and over and over again. So let's say I make a lower third from a lower third is a graphic that fits on the lower third of the screen. You see those on the news all the time, where they'll have like a professor talk, and then they'll have this lower third slide up and fly on the screen. It'll have their name and their title, whatever the case may be. It's one of the exercises and assignments you're going to do. Is something that's often done and needed, and you'll create some different ideas about. We'll do some different ideas about lower thirds. And so let's say that I make this lower third. And of course, let's say it's a documentary or it's a 10-minute feature and I've got 5 speakers and I'm going to use that same lower third each time. So I wanted to have the same background, same graphics, same setup, same font. I'll create a pre-comp and then I can drop in new text or keep the lower third and put in a new name and a new title and reuse that element over and over and over again. And that's one of the cool things about After Effects, is that it allows you to do things like that. So I think that's a pretty good session for the first night. Once again, we have office hours. I've got 20 minutes. So if you need to, if you want to chat with me, if you have any questions or concerns, we want to schedule a special session. We are open for business, and I'm more than willing to help you. I've got a long list of things that I'm going to be working on for additional components for the class, but the basic structure is in place, and it's just a matter of going in and spending time with it, and just don't. There's a certain amount of. I was overwhelmed when I first opened After Effects too. And it is a dense application, and there's lots of stuff in there. Just take it one step at a time. We're going to start at the beginning, to start with some basic concepts about keyframe and animation, and about setting up your graphics and making basic shapes, and then we'll transition over time to more sophisticated edits. And you know, you're not going to learn everything all at once. Don't try. Just relax and enjoy the ride. Okay, and you'll find yourself growing. Just spend time with the software and allow yourself to have fun and you know, enjoy the process. And you'll find yourself moving along smoothly enough. And like I said, there's still a whole lot about After Effects that I don't know. And but I really enjoy working with this very powerful application. It's amazing what can be done with it. And the idea with this course is I'm going to give you an overview of all the different types of things that can be done with After Effects. So we'll use it in conjunction with video footage and animation, motion graphics, titling, sequencing, rotoscoping, green screen, 3D, etc. So we're going to cover everything in such a way that you'll have an understanding of the application. Okay.
To type our names in?
Please type in your names in the chat. And then is there anyone that has anything else they want to say, or any comments, good or bad? Okay. Okay, let's call it a night. We'll see you guys all back here tomorrow evening. And I thank you all for your participation. Great job, everybody. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you and good